Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and give you the essential knowledge, the real insights from, well, often complex stories. Today, we're looking into a really chilling chapter of Australian true crime. It's known as the Backpacker Murders.
Right.
This is a series of serial killings that really gripped New South Wales, basically between 1989 and 1993.
A terrifying time.
Absolutely. And look, our deep dive today, it's built from a pretty comprehensive set of sources, mainly a detailed Wikipedia entry, so we're aiming for a factual account of these, well, horrific events.
Yeah, and our mission really is to pull out the most critical insights from all that information. We want to trace that timeline of discoveries, which is quite something.
It really is.
And look at the complexities of the investigation, how they actually caught him, and, the lasting impact. We want to make sure you get a clear understanding without feeling sort of swamped by every single detail.
Exactly. And it is a profoundly disturbing case. We'll get into the identity of the perpetrator, Ivan Milat, and the just tragic fate of his 7 young victims. 5 were foreign backpackers, 2 are Australians. We'll trace the police work, which was pretty meticulous in the end, that led to his capture.
Yeah, eventually.
And explore some of those unsettling questions that frankly still linger around this case even today. So yeah, let's get into the details.
Okay.
So to really kind of grasp the gravity here, we need to set the scene a bit. Think late 1980s, early 1990s Australia.
Right.
Hitchhiking. It sounds strange now maybe, but it was actually a fairly common way to travel. Adventurous, cheap, especially for backpackers.
Yeah, a different era in some ways.
Totally. But there was this growing undercurrent of concern about safety. It wasn't completely naive. There had been some high-profile unsolved missing person cases already.
Like Trudy Adams back in 78.
Exactly. And Tony Jones in 82, Naoko on to 87, Anna Rosaleva 91. These cases, they were starting to make people nervous. So people were already, starting to think maybe travel in pairs if you're going to hitchhike.
Makes sense.
And it was against this backdrop that these young backpackers started vanishing. We're talking Deborah Everest and James Gibson, both just 19, last seen December 89.
Okay.
Then Simone Schmidl, 21, she went missing January 91. Gabor Neugebauer, 21, and Anja Habshid, 20, they disappeared together in December 91.
Right.
And then Carolyn Clark, 21, and Joanne Walters, 22, last seen April 1992, a whole string of them.
And the horrifying part is how these separate disappearances started to connect. The first really grim discovery, that was September 92.
Right, the runners.
Exactly. September 19th and 20th, 2 runners, orienteering, stumbled across a concealed corpse in Belanglo State Forest. And the next morning, police found a second body, just 30 meters away. They were quickly identified as the British backpackers, Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters.
And the state they were found in was just brutal.
Oh, incredibly brutal. Walters had been stabbed 15 times, chest, neck, back, wounds that caused paralysis.
15 times.
Yeah, and Clark, she'd been shot 10 times in the head, right there at the burial site. Police actually thought she'd been used as, target practice.
Gosh, that's something else.
And despite this horror, the initial police assessment, after they searched the area thoroughly, was that, this was no more bodies expected in the forest.
Wow, they were tragically wrong about that, weren't they?
Terribly wrong.
Because the horror didn't stop there.
Yeah.
A year later, October 93, Belanglo gives up more secrets, reveals this chilling pattern. It wasn't just those first 2. A local man, just out looking for firewood deep in the forest, stumbled across human bones.
Right.
He calls the police, and soon they uncover 2 more bodies, identified later as the Australians, James Gibson and Deborah Everest.
And the details were just as savage.
Exactly. Gibson's skeleton, 8 stab wounds, 1 massive knife wound actually cut through his upper spine, paralyzing him. Others hit his heart and lungs. And Everest, she'd been just brutally beaten, skull fractured in 2 places, broken jaw, nice marks on her forehead, and 1 stab wound in the back. Just savage.
The level of violence is staggering.
And here's a really puzzling thing, something that must have, confused investigators early on.
What's that?
Gibson's camera. It was actually found way back in December 89, and his backpack turned up in March 1990.
Okay.
But they were found over 120 kilometers north of Belanglo in a place called Galston Gorge, long before his body was discovered.
Wow, okay. So his belongings surfaced years earlier and miles away.
Exactly. That must have created a real sense of misdirection, right? Made it harder to link things initially.
Absolutely. That complicates the timeline, the geography, everything. And you mentioned Everest's prolonged ordeal, that savage beating. that points to something truly disturbing about the killer's mindset.
Yeah.
And then just weeks after Gibson and Everest were found, the discoveries continued. November 1st, 1993, police are doing a systematic sweep. They find a skeleton in a clearing. It's Simone Schmidl, the German backpacker. At least 8 stab wounds, 2 actually severed her spine.
God.
And disturbingly, clothing found with her body wasn't hers. It matched the description of clothing worn by Anja Habscheid, the other missing German woman.
Oh, no.
Then, just 3 days later, November 4th, they find the bodies of Habscheid and Gabor Neugebauer. Shallow graves, only 50 meters apart.
So close.
Yeah. Habscheid had been decapitated. Her skull was never found.
Never found.
Never. Yeah. And Neugebauer had been shot 6 times in the head.
The range of methods. Scabbing, shooting, beating, decapitation.
Exactly. And the evidence, like those spinal injuries, suggested some victims didn't die instantly. There was prolonged suffering. It really indicated a sadistic element, that the killer wasn't just trying to kill quickly.
Just unimaginable cruelty. So with this escalating horror, the police response had to ramp up, right?
Oh, definitely. October 14th, 1993, they established Task Force Air.
Task Force Air, okay.
Yeah, this wasn't just, throwing a few more cops at it. It was a dedicated unit. Over 20 detectives, analysts, a big multidisciplinary team showed how serious this was.
Right, a centralized effort.
Absolutely. And the urgency was clear. By November 5th, the government upped the reward significantly. $500,000 for information.
That's a huge amount, especially then.
Huge. And they issued public warnings, specifically telling international backpackers, look, avoid hitchhiking along the Hume Highway.
A major travel route.
Exactly. But the investigation itself, they were drowning in data. Just an enormous amount.
I can imagine.
But this is where technology, even then, started to play a key role. They used something called link analysis technology.
Link analysis, what's that involved?
Well, basically, they fed in all sorts of records. Roads and traffic authority vehicle registrations, gym memberships, gun licenses, even internal police files.
Okay.
And the tech helped them find connections, patterns, overlaps between all these different data points. Things a human might miss just wading through paperwork.
So like early data mining for policing?
Pretty much, yeah. It allowed them to sift through this massive pile and slowly, methodically, narrow down the suspect list. They went from about 230 names down to just 32 possibles.
Wow, that's a significant narrowing. And as they did that, these similarities you mentioned must have become much clearer.
Definitely. A profile started to emerge. All the bodies dumped in remote bushland, covered in that specific way, like a pyramid of sticks and ferns.
Almost a signature.
Exactly. Forensic work showed those multiple stab wounds to the torso were common. And sadly, signs of sexual assault on many victims. Plus, they found campsites near each body, suggesting the killer didn't just dump them and run. He restrained them, spent time with them.
God, that makes it even worse somehow.
It does, and ballistics were crucial. Matching .22 bullets, shell casings, cartridge boxes from 2 specific weapons linked all the crime scenes.
2 weapons, but linking all scenes.
Yeah, strongly suggesting one person using those guns. And the location, Belanglo Forest, it's rugged terrain. They figured the killer almost certainly had a 4-wheel drive, probably a local.
Right. But you mentioned the different methods of killing, stabbing, shooting. Did that lead to theories about maybe more than one killer being involved?
Yeah.
Especially since victims were often in pairs.
That's a great question. And yes, that was definitely considered. The variation in methods, the fact that victims were sometimes buried separately even if attacked together, it absolutely raised the possibility of an accomplice or even multiple killers working together.
So that was on the table.
For sure.
Yeah.
But the consistency of other elements, the ballistics matching across all scenes, that very specific burial ritual kept pointing strongly towards a single primary offender.
Okay.
And then came the breakthrough, the piece that really started to lock it all together. It came from a phone call on November 13th, 1993.
Right. This is Paul Onions.
Exactly. Paul Onions, calling from the UK. He tells police about this absolutely terrifying thing that happened to him back on January 25th, 1990.
3 years earlier.
Yeah. He's backpacking, hitchhiking south of Sydney near Casula. Got a ride from a guy who called himself Bill.
Bill. Okay.
They drive south past Mittagong, and then